and welcome to Convex, where we are celebrating experiment-driven marketing. My name is Vipul and I lead co-marketing at VWO. Want to fix leaks in your precious conversion funnel? Try VWO. Today, joining us all the way from Pennsylvania is Craig Smith, who is the founder and CEO of Trinity Insight, a full-service agency that specializes in internet and e-commerce optimization. I welcome you here with us, Craig.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, before I let Craig start with his wonderful presentation, I just want to inform you that you can join Convex's official networking group on LinkedIn and ask your questions there from this presentation. With that, Craig, the stage is all yours.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen now and the presentation today. So really what we're doing today is going through our 10 best experiments that we've been able to achieve over the last 12 months or so, as well as going through a variety of the key aspects of a conversion optimization methodology so your business or brand can be best positioned to enhance the usability and make your site more effective and obviously convert more customers. As a quick introduction about me, I have 20 years of experience in digital and e-commerce. I served as a strategist at eBay Enterprise before starting Trinity in 2006, and I'm extremely passionate about helping brands grow their businesses through data and optimization. My goal for today is really that you come out of this with a plan of attack. You're going to have clear examples of different types of experiments that you can run on your website to make it more effective, and that hopefully my presentation will be your favorite from today. As far as an overview, again, we're going to be talking about our methodology and with the goal of providing for you the same framework that we execute for Fortune companies and enterprise retailers, allowing your brand to see exactly the steps that you need to take to leverage data, research, design, and technology in unison so that you're going to drive growth in your business. And then again, I think what you're going to find is the most compelling points of today's presentation is the clear examples and ideas. Our best performing experiments, there's 10 of them. Each one of these experiments drove significant revenue and value and impact, and I hope that you'll find this very interesting. Starting out though, I think it's important to first look at what is a methodology that you should embrace within your brand to optimize your website. This is exactly, and what I'm going to be showing you is exactly the framework that we go through with retailers and brands, and I think in any business it can be leveraged. There's a first phase of researching and planning the effort you're going to execute. When we start out, there's a deep dive into Google Analytics or whatever your platform is to make sure that you have data integrity. This is critical. You need to make sure that you're capturing all of the page level session data with appropriate analytical tracking, because that's going to be very important to decipher where you have opportunity. You also want to look at the website itself from a standpoint of usability and your page templates. If you're an e-commerce retailer, for example, your homepage, your category page, your product pages, your cart, your checkout, you need to go through and someone on your team, hopefully a UX specialist, can provide a heuristic analysis into what things could potentially be changed. And then the final piece of this research and planning phase is defining the revenue impact of what these changes are going to look like in terms of if we hit certain goals, what is the revenue impact to our brand? And this is an example of that. You can kind of see from a customer of ours, we're showing, if we at certain progression points are able to move the needle to a certain effect, what is it going to be to the overall revenue of the brand? And the reason you want to do this is because it sets up the business case. It provides clear data into performance and what your goals should be. And after all this is done, you then move to the testing program. And this is obviously where VWO is a critical piece of that puzzle, where you're designing the experiment, which is the creative, the conceptual design. You're launching in VWO. You're running and collecting data, and ultimately you analyze and conclude. and then move forward into an implementation phase, or as I'll mention later, hosting it into the cloud. So this is kind of, again, that initial research and planning steps to go through with the right data, your ideation, your data definition, and then moving into the designing, running, and analyzing of your information in your testing program. Just a couple quick snapshots and some examples. So from a standpoint of planning out a test, you want to make sure that you have ideas and insights into what percentage of traffic is going to get through the test. In this example, it's 100% of only desktop visitors. You want to also define what a goal is going to look like. What's your test population, your expected launch, and your duration. All of this is going to be really important so you can define exactly what is going to be going on in your experiment. You then want to create the concepts, the variations of what you're going to construct. Here is a detailed list of what you're going to change, and either in an A-B split test or A-B-C-D split test environment or a multivariate environment, you want to exactly show the creative and construct the creative for what you want to change. You then obviously build it out in Visual Website Optimizer, and we love VWO. We've been a partner with VWO for over a decade now, and use it to essentially serve all of these template variations. But really the key discipline here and the key component is JavaScript and CSS. We're heavily manipulating the structure, the appearance of the web page without the user obviously ever noticing. And then lastly, it's really important when you're constructing your optimization program and your efforts, you do a lot of quality assurance, because browsers are different, and you want to make sure that your new page, your new presentation is going to render perfectly in every type of mobile browser, every type of desktop browser, and make sure that you have the right quality assurance so you have approval. As the test goes on, you want to construct reporting into your performance. You can do this within Visual Website Optimizer. This is an example of how we tie in VWO to Google Data Studio, but again, have a 48-hour validation period at the end of your test. Now, moving in to the next part of the presentation, this is our top performing test. This is what I think you're going to get the most value from today. I'm showing you some examples from customer data that's going to really get that ideation exercise kickstarted in your organization. And let's jump right in. The first one is a value proposition test. So what we're doing here, we had the hypothesis that if we incorporated the value proposition of the brand we were optimizing throughout the entire web experience, we were going to get a higher rate of lead submissions, more interactivity with the site, and utilizing global information bars to present the key components of this service. In this case, their free home rental price analysis, the certified tenant match, and the property management piece. And concluded with that, a call to action. You can see here the result was 45.70% increase in form submissions overall in the site traffic by incorporating this global value proposition. Obviously, this is a massive result to the business, drove the call center and sales to a higher degree of activity, and hopefully, and I'm sure it is dramatically impacting revenue on the back end. The next test that I like to talk about is a quote form test that we constructed for a business-to-business brand. What we did here is really focus in on this form that was presented all throughout the site. We looked to alter the visual presentation, condense the required fields, reorder the fields, with the hypothesis that people are going to convert at a higher rate when it's just an easier step. And then this is the big part of their business. And by having it as the main driver of leads, we knew that we had to get at least a couple variations to make sure that we're optimizing. And you can see in one of our, I think it was the second experiment here, we were able to get a 28.4% increase in form submissions, again, empowering an inside sales team and an outside sales team with a lot more fresh leads, a lot more interactivity with the business that's going to increase the enterprise profit and performance. The next one is coming from an e-commerce environment where this customer was looking for alternative ways to present packages. The control variation that you can see presented the packages in this type of tab-based breakdown in which users had to click on the tabs to see the different types of packages that were presented. Our thesis was that we were going to increase the clarity of the content by presenting it all in one single presentation. As you can see, there's a pretty significant design change here where we presented them all in one single presentation, made it a horizontal content layout versus a vertical content layout, and we felt this would drive a greater level of conversion. And what you can see here is the result was a 19.42% increase in progression rate. Now, this is an important concept to understand. Progression rate is the percentage of people that go from this page template to the next page template in their funnel. It's really important that you measure your experiments on progression rates or a single goal on a page versus the overall conversion rate. Because theoretically, if your progression rate goes up 19% and the rest of your funnel holds true, your conversion rate is going to also increase at 19%. But you don't want to measure that conversion rate in a vacuum in a specific page template test. So in this case, they had almost 20% more people click on that book now or view details button that increased them down the funnel. So a really effective test for this brand. The next test that I want to talk about is checkout value proposition. And this can be almost in any type of conversion funnel where you got that last mile. You have someone almost at the conclusion of when you're going to convert them. In this case, what we noticed is that a lot of people were abandoning at this final step when they had to, apply or start their trial, use a credit card. That was not happening to the degree for which we thought it could be achieved. What we did here is place the value propositions in close proximity to the order summary box. And by placing an increased emphasis on them, we expected to see an increase in users starting the trial, which is ultimately the conversion they wanted, the customer. And you can see here, we had a 54% increase in trials by incorporating these value propositions in close proximity to the order summary. And that's the key thing here to take away. Think through your value propositions. What's important in your business and your brand, and incorporate them near that final step, that final click that you need to take. In e-commerce, we've done many experiments where we re-emphasize security, we re-emphasize shipping, we re-emphasize returns at this step, and you want to make sure that you do the same thing at your final step. The next test I want to talk about is a mobile checkout presentation test. And this, again, is specific for e-commerce, but really holds true, again, for any type of business in lead gen as well. What we did here is we redesigned the checkout presentation to really just follow more modern design trends and best practices with our goal of increasing overall conversion on mobile devices. When we looked at the data, the desktop conversion was trending upward, but the mobile conversion was a laggard, and we knew that this page was not performing. And you can kind of see here in the control and variation examples, it wasn't drastic changes. It was making the form boxes bigger. It was not using black text outlines. It was making the call to action clear and more easier clicked upon with a thumb or a finger. And this test saw strong lifts in conversion immediately after launch. The styling to the more modern presentation, but it was important, but the primary focus of the changes were just making this checkout flow more intuitive and user-friendly. But again, a great impact is it got a 7.5% lift in checkout conversion. Here's another mobile checkout presentation that I thought was important to show, and this one got a 11.2% increase to add to cart rate. The hypothesis of this experiment was we really wanted to provide users with easy access to the product details from the buy box. What we did, we used VWO to incorporate the overview, reviews, and knowledge component higher up as a jump point to get people to the content that that is going to provide the knowledge they're looking for. In this example, the winning variation, again, incorporated those links above the product image, and those links anchored directly to the corresponding details down the page. This led the users to the information they wanted faster and more prominently above the fold, which again helped them in making the conversion decision. And this again drove a 11% increase to the add to cart rate. This was another very interesting experiment. The way I titled it was product page old versus new, but you can see what we're doing here. We're presenting the personalization form in its entirety and allowed this brand, which sells personalized children's books, the ability to mirror a previous function that they had in their business years ago. So our customer came to us and showed us this page. We noticed it wasn't performing, and we went back and looked at old versions of the website in the Wayback Machine, worked with the customer in conducting some primary and secondary research into these pages, and incorporated a new presentation for personalizing a book. You can see in the top version is up there where it says control. This was the existing page where you had this vertical layout in which the user had to include the child's information in this step-based sequential module. The variation takes a different approach. We have a simpler create your book component that's dropped down, or it presented in a module that allows someone to put in the information, click add to bag, and start the process. And what we found was the updated personalization process and page layout was much more effective than the existing design. This drove a 21% increase to overall conversion and probably a higher percent increase to the page progression rate, as we talked about before. Another test that we ran for an e-commerce retailer really was looked to provide intuitive design, to incorporate just best practices to simplify the fields. In this example, we've condensed the billing address. We've made it so that the billing address can associate to the shipping address on a click versus showing both fields. When you show both fields and you make the user type in their address information a second time, it presents dramatic fatigue, which can cause people to abandon. We wanted to not have that in the presentation, or in the site presentation, I should say, and use VWO to, again, simplify the checkout, to make it easier, to make the call to action a little bit more cleaner, to include another place order button into the page. And you can see here we had an nearly 12% increase in overall conversion by incorporating this cleaner, more optimized, more user-friendly and intuitive checkout process. Here's another great example relating to urgency. If your brand and your business has any type of urgency that they can incorporate into the call to action within your funnel, I highly recommend doing it. If you're an informational product, maybe it's a countdown timer. In this example, which is e-commerce, we incorporated stock messaging for products with 10 or less items in stock. And our thoughts were this would dramatically increase the effectiveness of our pages. And you can see that the control version on the left, the variation on the right, the variation included stock messaging that had a data connection to pull in that stock number, and it had a dramatic increase to conversion. In this example, we're able to have a 30% increase in the conversion rate by including the stock number right above that call to action, right above that add to cart button. So the takeaway here, think through what elements you can bring in to your conversion action that's going to give some type of urgency, either time or inventory, that's going to make the user have more of a need to act now. And this next example is showing an order summary. That example, that redesigning an order summary will increase clarity and increase conversion. In this example here, what we did was really make aesthetic changes. And aesthetics are going to be a key part for your program and how you execute conversion optimization. Functionality is very important. Speed is very important. but aesthetics is also very important. In this example, we really didn't change much functionality on the page. We changed the aesthetics, incorporated a different layout for how we wanted to present the brand and the calls to action for this informational product. And what we achieved was a 25% increase to the overall conversion rate by including the order summary on the right side and providing users with a checkout experience that they would likely experience on an e-commerce store. So now let's talk about your brand. If you would like a free user experience analysis of your website, we'd love to give you one. Email me at csmith@trinityinsight.com. I'd be happy to align you with one of our user experience specialists who will construct the document for you and go through it with you and share their findings and perspectives. And out of that document, you'll get a lot of new ideas to how to execute a conversion program on your site. And again, this is 100% free. And you can also request this at trinityinsight.com. Just go there, follow the conversion optimization user experience pathway, and you'll have the ability to request it there. So with that, I want to thank you for the time today. I really appreciate VWO for giving me the chance to speak. But I'm going to now open it up for any questions and any further commentary.
Wow, that was really an insightful presentation, Craig. Quite amazing examples that I'm sure that the audience would love to replicate in their respective online businesses.
Thank you.
So before I take up the questions, I just wanted to highlight this one test that you mentioned in your presentation earlier about the mobile checkout rates that showed an uplift of 7.58% in the mobile checkout rates. Small examples just there that the businesses need to take care of and improve conversion rates, isn't it?
Yeah, and I always say this to folks that I meet who might not be familiar with conversion optimization. It's very much an iterative, step-by-step effort. It is not a silver bullet. It is not something in which you're going to just have 3 tests and be done. It is very much like I make this as a kind of a joke analogy. It's like baseball. You're going to get a single. You're going to get a single. You're going to strike out. You're going to strike out. You're going to get a single, and then boom, you hit that home run, and you get that winning experiment that really is like one of the ones we showed, which will dramatically affect your business.
Yeah, and when you mentioned step by step, you reminded me of the importance of having a proper hypothesis in place for a successful conversion optimization program.
Yeah, you need to go in with each experiment with a thesis. And you also need to go into each experiment with clear data. The data is going to tell you exactly what is happening. Now, research and the tools that VWO provides, heat maps, recording, surveying, that's going to tell you why it's happening. But the data is going to tell you what's happening. Both are really, really important. You cannot just go into a testing program and just jump in, I want to test the homepage. Okay, test it for what? Is the problem progression into a product page or category page? Is the problem abandonment? Is the problem just lack of clarity and the bounce rate's really high? So there's a variety of things to consider, and that's why you need to make sure you have clean data that's going to tell you the approach to go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I think, I can now move on to the questions that I have for you. So the first question is, what are the most critical components of a conversion optimization workflow that you outlined?
Yeah, I think two components that are really important. One is, as I mentioned before, quality assurance. Before you launch an experiment, you need to make sure that it is rendering perfectly on all browsers and device types. Because if you don't do that, if you don't spend the time and the resources to make sure that takes place, what's going to happen is you're going to launch an experiment and maybe it's not working in a certain version of Explorer or maybe not working in a certain version of Safari, and your data is polluted. So the experiment is going to be null and void because you're going to get potentially calls into your call center or contact form saying, hey, your website's broken, and it's just not the approach you want to have. So to do the quality assurance is very important. And the second piece I would say is, again, that data engineering discipline where you can ensure you have right data, but also do the custom segmentation that's going to tell your business where the key lagging areas of your website are. Because every website is different. Every website has different areas of the site that have monetary opportunity. They need to be documented, and then you need to model out at a low, mid, and high effect like I said, single, double, home run, what is the revenue impact that we're going to see? What is the lead flow impact that we're going to see? And that is going to make your whole process much, much more effective.
Perfect. So my next question to you is, what are the key disciplines that are needed for a brand to reach full potential in UX optimization?
Yeah, I would say there's two disciplines that, outside of the data piece that we just talked about, that you need to make sure are in your organization or you have access to some degree. The first is brand aesthetics. The designer, the person who's constructing what we call a conceptual design, the new look and feel of a page that's going to be tested and experiment against the control version. And you want to make sure that, this is part of the reason, why folks hire us, is because you want a third-party perspective, or just someone who's maybe fresh to your organization who hasn't been with the company for 10 years, because it's going to give you new ideas and new ways to present your brand value proposition, as mentioned earlier. The second discipline that I think is really important is JavaScript. The web, internet browsers, HTML5, it's JavaScript driven. Every website you see is JavaScript driven. And with the proliferation of JavaScript and how great it is to work with VWO, you can essentially make any type of change you want in a presentation with the right JavaScript chops. So JavaScript is a technology, and more specifically, jQuery is a technology that needs to be leveraged, and that discipline needs to be embraced within a testing program.
Right. So that makes me curious about the conversion challenges or obstacles that your customers face, and also how do you help overcome them?
Yeah, great question. So the first, I would say, is executive oversight. Too often, we get situations in which the CEO, the VP of marketing, they have their favorite design. They have the design that they might have improved 6 months ago or a year ago that we feel is underperforming, but they might have this legacy bias, and they don't want to change for change's sake. Now, that sometimes can add levels of friction in an organization to have an experiment or an optimization effort for a certain page to get traction. The way to overcome that is data. And is that slide I showed earlier that says, this is what we can be making if we make these changes and hit our goals. When that data is presented to an executive team, I've never seen any instance in which that hesitation from the executives is still persistent. So that is the way to overcome it. There's a funny saying in the optimization world, the HIPPO, the highest informed paid person in the room. They get on your side and become an ally for you when you have the data and the revenue models that paint the vision of what you're trying to achieve. The second challenge, I would say, and we use VWO heavily in overcoming it, is implementation after experimentation. So let's give a hypothetical example. Let's say we run a checkout page optimization test, and it wins, and it outperforms the control version by 20%. In that instance, we're given high fives. We're all excited. We know we're going to make more money for the customer at that point. It's now up to the customer to implement the new version. But what frequently happens is technology backlogs, alternative priorities, code freezes, things that delay the actual implementation of the new presentation, what we call hard coding the new presentation. In this instance, what we use VWO for is to render via the cloud. We then say, okay, you can't implement it for 6 months, no problem. We're going to render that winning variation via the cloud using VWO to all of your traffic. So you get the economic and monetary benefits from that experiment. It is now to a point where VWO, obviously, and the web in general, and the cloud is so fast that there literally is no difference between cloud rendering and hard coding from a standpoint of speed. So I have some customers that literally are changing their checkout and cart pages every other month and only do it via the cloud and look to the cloud as their lever to achieve what I call agility, speed. It's giving the marketers the ability to get ideas in the wild faster and get it out to their customer base with that same level of speed. So those are the two main obstacles: executive kind of friction potentially that's overcome with data, and implementation bottlenecks that get overcome using the cloud and VWO.
That's right. So my next question is basically something that I'm personally curious to know more about is, what books are you currently reading?
What I'm currently reading right now, I just finished it. I just got back from vacation yesterday morning, and I just finished the book called 10% Happier. It's all about meditation and the story of an ABC news anchor who embraced Buddhism and meditation as a way to essentially relieve anxiety and present a alternative way of living. And it was recommended to me from a friend, and I loved it. It was a great, great book.
That sounds like an interesting book. My last question is, how can the audience connect with you?
Yeah, so you can connect with me directly, and I would recommend that at csmith, via email at csmith@trinityinsight.com. That's insight singular. And you can also go to our website at www.trinityinsight.com. Send us a contact request or a hello message, and we'll reach out. And like I said before, we do provide free user experience review documentation to give you some ideas. It's a 10 to 20 page document that I can guarantee your audience will get a lot of value from. So feel free to request that for your website, and we can show you what potentially should be changed to optimize your conversion rate.
Absolutely. And if you want a free UX analysis of your website, do reach out to Craig directly on his email address or just visit trinityinsight.com. With that, we've reached the end of this session. Thank you so much, Craig, for your time and effort that you've put into creating this wonderful presentation and enlightening our audience.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.